Hello, welcome to Working Lunch, the SLO Chamber's weekly series where we sit down with key community leaders and hopefully find some new connections within our community that we aren't getting the chance to have during this crisis. I'm Jim Dantona, President and CEO of the SLO Chamber, and today you'll get a look behind the glitz and glamour of the life of an elected official in my conversation with Assemblyman Jordan Cunningham. And how often do you get to sit down with your assemblyman for lunch, as all of us are doing right now via Facebook Live? He represented represents the 5th District Assembly, which includes northern Santa Barbara County and all of SLO County since 2016. Over the past few weeks and months, we at the Chamber have been working closely with the Assemblyman and his team and have invited him to lunch today to talk about what things are like now that the Assembly is back in session, get his take on legislating and being a representative during these challenging times. And of course, maybe most importantly, talk about his new role as a videographer for his children. So thank you so much for being here with us, Mr. Assemblyman.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate the opportunity to come on. It's been a crazy 8 weeks for sure. Our state and our county has asked a lot of our residents over these last 8 weeks. And our workers and our small business owners. Our county moved quicker than virtually anywhere in the state to address this pandemic. We moved fast to secure additional medical supplies and PPE and ventilators and expand our hospital capacity. We stood up at our own expense. The county stood up the alternative care site in partnership with Cal Poly, which expand bed capacity by up to 930 beds. That was a great public-private collaboration, I should add. And we asked our residents to make tremendous sacrifices that, for reasons I'm sure we'll get into, I believe have caused some considerable pain and considerable economic and public health harm. I think at the time we did it back in mid-March, it was necessary to bend the curve, as they say, and slow the transmission of COVID-19 and give us time to catch up on the healthcare side. I think we did that, and by my estimation, as of probably mid-April, we were ready to start a phased science-based reopening. All 7 elected mayors in our county, 2 of our supervisors and myself sent a letter to the governor asking for permission to implement that plan. And since on April 20th, and from April 20th to now, so almost a month, we've been trying to negotiate with the state and been hitting some roadblocks because the state thus far has taken a very top-down approach to allowing counties to reopen. So we've made some progress there, but it isn't enough, and we need to keep going. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Well, it's been great. And I'll tell you, having, as you know, I've spent a little time in government down in Southern California. I'm really impressed by the way our communities work together, both at the state, local, as you said, having the mayors join in with you in talking about what this county is doing, working with the cities, county, and state, and our feds with Congressman Carvajal, all of that working so closely together. It's really been obviously difficult for everyone, but I can say from having my experience that it's been amazing to see the work you're doing and our elected officials are doing to try and shorten this and make this the most effective use of their time and resources possible. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, so let's just start real quick. Where are you zooming in from today? Are you at home? Are you in Sacramento?
I am home. I'm in my law office in Templeton. We're actually in the midst of moving to another space. So movers are coming Monday. That's why usually I have pictures of my 4 kids up on the wall behind me, but those are in a box somewhere. So I was in Sacramento Monday through Thursday of this week and Monday through Thursday of last week. The speaker called us back into session on May 4th. We recessed on March 16th to be home to help our locals deal with the COVID-19. And I think the speaker made a very good call in bringing us back because, from that period of time, March 16 to May 4th, I mean, we effectively didn't have a functioning democracy. Every decision was being made by executive order, by the governor and a handful of staffers in the governor's office. So I'm glad to be back to work. I always prefer being home to being in Sacramento, frankly. but we're starting to hear bills and do the people's work, and also provide what I believe to be a critical function of the legislature, which is oversight of the administrative branch.
Well, that's why I was a little confused at where you were zooming in from. I'm used to seeing the pictures of your kids behind you, so makes sense that you're here. And well, it's good to hear that hopefully you're getting the move is going smoothly. That'll be nice to see the new office and get the kids back behind you for all your Zoom meetings, which I anticipate we'll be doing for a while. So maybe a little bit on that. Tell us a little bit about a day in your shelter life during that time. You know, who are you sheltering with? Are you in the law office? Are you at home? What are kind of some of those new parts of your day in general, and how's it going?
Well, so, prior to being back in session, we were like everybody else. The kids weren't in school. Our kids our girls are 9th and 7th grade, and our sons are 6th grade and TK. So our school district in Templeton did a very admirable job of transitioning to kind of the remote learning thing. They got that up pretty quickly. So, but there is kind of a homeschool aspect to it too, because and it's just hard to keep kids occupied for this amount of time. Frankly, we tried to build in as much structure. I mean, my wife and I, she's my law partner. We split the day up. So depending on who had what meetings and when, a lot of her work is client calls and Zoom meetings and telephonic court appearances now. So we just sort of, one of us would take the morning in the office and the other would stay home, and then we'd switch in the afternoon. The first, I've spent more time on the phone and on Zoom. I didn't know what Zoom was till like March 15th, but now I do. But a lot of it's, telephone calls with state agencies, phone calls with our electeds locally. For a while, every elected official in SLO County was doing a daily call. We switched that to 3 days a week, talking to Wade Horton, our CAO, multiple times a week, Dr. Penny Bornstein, multiple times a week. And it was pretty crazy in the first phase, especially because we were essentially seeing our county, like everywhere else, kind of preempted and trying to get ventilators and the medical supplies that we needed to expand our capacity on the healthcare side by the federal government, by the Pentagon, then by the state, and then trying to get the state through Cal OES, Office of Emergency Services. I was on the phone with them nearly daily for first certainly 3 weeks, if not 4, of this crisis, trying to get them to deliver stuff to us, make sure, hey, don't forget about us. There's a tendency in California government, anything that kind of runs through the state level tends to go to the Bay Area and Los Angeles first. And Los Angeles doesn't, they don't need to try too hard to get their voice heard because it's so big. There's 10 million people in LA County plus. And I think 30 legislators out of the 80 in the Assembly have some portion of LA County in their district. So, they don't need to exactly like band together. Like LA County's going to have its voice heard on the natural. So, whereas we have to be a little bit more maybe aggressive about that. So, we tried to structure things for the kids so they were, let them sleep in as late as they needed to, daily exercise, do the schoolwork, do their chores. My wife and I took up gardening. So, we planted a garden, and my son and I planted a bunch of fruit trees. My day for a while pretty much started with the mandatory 2 cups of coffee to get my brain working. And then I was watering plants and watering trees for a while I was on phone calls, for state business. We did buy the kids an Xbox. We'd been working on this old Xbox 360 or something we'd had for like a decade. My son's birthday got canceled. We had a pretty cool thing planned for him to go to March Madness for basketball. But that of course got canceled. So my wife calls me up. She's like, hope you won't be mad. Just went to Target, bought an Xbox One for Tyler for his birthday. I said, I won't be mad if you bought Madden, the football game. They play a moderate amount of Xbox. We'll put it that way. My 5-year-old, by the way, his ideal life is to spend 12 hours a day sleeping and the other 12 playing Minecraft. So we have to really watch the Minecraft hours for him.
That's funny. So, I mean, it could make it a class, you know, and that homeschooling piece is, and one of the questions I guess would be, is there a focus so far on a extra schooling on political science and government or law for the kids, or do they get enough of that from on the natural?
They get enough law just from overhearing their mom and I talk about our cases. So I think that's sort of, they'll get that by osmosis. They probably get enough government listening to me, you know, yell at the governor's legislative affairs director about twice a week, or Cal OES or whoever else. So, you know, we're okay there. The big thing is probably, you know, 7th grade math. It's been a challenge because, you know, that's our second child is in 7th grade math. And as parents probably know, I mean, my bachelor's degree is in physics, and I was kind of a math guy, but they teach it completely differently than I learned it. So you got to go learn, you know, it's a very conceptual approach to mathematics, which requires more in-person time and then more, you know, iterative work on working through problem sets. So when you don't have the classroom setting, that gets to be kind of tough. So, you know, that's been a lot of the focus. And then my oldest daughter just took her first AP test. So they're giving AP tests out now. You take them as freshmen. So it's kind of weird. Back in our day, that was like a junior, senior year thing. But now you can take them pretty early. So
I think that's funny. It's because I was a math guy. And so, you know, very early on, as we were getting into this and we knew there was going to be some shelter in place stuff happening, I saw a meme go out with, I think the kids are going to have to learn for the first time how to carry the one, right? This idea of how, because we all learn math a totally different way than this core.
It was, you know, it was drill and kill back then, right? Here's your equation, go do that 9,000 times. And, you know, and that works for some and doesn't work for others. And, you know, that's, I don't think it's all bad, but it's certainly a little bit of a challenge.
Well, I think it's, and one of the things, obviously, I know you're spending, you know, as an elected official, there's so much we could dive into here about, you know, how you lose your personal life, or people don't see you as a person and how they attack you. Your family has to deal with that. You're also spending, there's no direct flights to Sacramento, so you're spending a lot of time going back and forth. So one of the things I've enjoyed so much is seeing the enthusiastic dad posting on social media and how much fun you're having with your kids. And, you know, can you talk a little bit about the challenges of having a family based here while you serve in Sacramento? And, you know, I think Heidi Harmon also talked a little bit about how people don't respect, you know, that you're a person with a family, and they attack, you know, personal attacks come in. Can you talk a little bit about how that is as an elected official with a family?
Yeah, probably the biggest challenge for us is just the balancing act of me being gone. I mean, it's less this year because we were in recess due to the pandemic. But, you know, the other 3 years I've served, you know, you spend about 7.5 months a year, about half the week, about 7.5 months a year up in Sacramento doing legislative work. And, you know, it falls mostly on my wife. I mean, she's got to sort of keep all the balls in the air, you know, it's a constant kind of juggling act. She's an exceptional multitasker, probably the best one I've ever met. So that helps, but the family's really got to be, you know, supportive. I mean, otherwise I just don't know how you'd pull it off. I mean, I'm very fortunate because she's very supportive. My kids are very supportive in their own way. Can't get them to walk a precinct though, let me assure you. They will never do that for me. I mean, I think I had one kid, my first primary, that walked one day, and, you know, I had to bribe him with ice cream, and I was so, you know, they don't get into that so much, but you do need to kind of create a bit of a bubble, or kind of shield your kids a little bit from the public eye. We're very fortunate because the Templeton community has been, they've been super great, you know, about, you know, treating our kids as, you know, just like any other kid. And I mean, I don't really, even when I'm at you know, back when we had sports, you know, youth sports, I'd be coaching, and, you know, people kind of generally are pretty respectful. You know, once in a while, somebody might on a weekend say, hey, I got an issue I'm curious about, it's a public policy thing, or they got a issue with a state agency, and I give them my card, call me Monday, we'll figure it out. People by and large have been pretty good. In person, I've had very few. I've had 2 or 3 times where I had to call CHP for people that were acting very erratically and aggressively. But praise God, that's never happened with any of my family members. And then, people are really nasty on social media, though. I will say that. For mental health reasons, I basically, I approve and edit every single post that's put up on my official state assembly Facebook page. And I mostly run Twitter myself, although my chief of staff helps out with that. But I don't actually read the comments. I stopped doing that about 2 years ago. I just found myself like, this isn't a good use of time. Like people are really nasty to you sometimes if they disagree, or they're really nasty to other people that are commenting that they disagree with. And so that was a good change, because I think that for whatever reason, people have a need to vent, and I get it, and people are angry and they're scared, and they have strong views about things, and those pages are, it's a public resource, and they're there to comment on, as long as people don't swear or make threats or do crazy stuff. You drive yourself a little crazy, I think, if you follow that too carefully personally.
Yeah, and it's a sad state that you have to do that, but it's you're getting your information out, and social media seems to be, as long as people are behind a wall, they feel like they can attack on that level. So
what's funny is they'll say things that if you were sitting in front of them, they would never in 1,000 years say that to you, right? But because they're behind a computer screen in their pajamas or whatever, they feel like they could just launch. It's kind of a weird psychology with it. I think there are some benefits to democracy that social media brings, for sure, and it's a great tool to communicate to a large part of your constituency. So it's got its pros as well as its cons.
Yeah, certainly. Well, now that the assembly is kind of back in session, I'm curious to know how it feels to be back, and is it different? Is it same? You maybe take us behind the scenes a little bit and talk about, as you started, before, when you were when legislature was kind of out, the governor was doing that. So has the executive and legislative relationship changed? Interested to find out how that's going.
Yeah, so things are a lot different. They slimmed the bill package down. So this year we're only going to hear bills that have a COVID-19 tie-in, and the speaker left that decision to make that a screening process work. He left that up to the committee chairs. So, some did different things, but the overall bill package, I think, went from like 2,000 down to 300. So there's a lot fewer bills, but our committee hearing process takes a lot longer, because we're socially distanced 6 feet apart in the committee rooms. We're generally all wearing masks, although I did chair a committee the other day, and it's really hard to talk for a long period of time wearing a mask. You actually get out of breath. So I didn't use it when I was chairing, but when I generally present bills, or you're sitting in committee, you're spaced apart, you're wearing a mask. There's a teleconference line that the witnesses can call in and testify to on. There's a call-in line for the public, and then public is still allowed in the building. They just keep them 6 feet apart if they want to come up and make a statement about a bill. Assembly, they did a nice job setting all that up. It took some time, it took some technology, but there's important constitutional rights for the public to be heard in the legislative process that are at stake. And I think we're executing those pretty well. It does take forever, though. I mean, the hearing I chaired was 4 bills, all non-controversial, 7-0 votes. It's the Jobs and Economic Development Committee, which I'm vice chair, but the chair's on maternity leave. I joked that, I didn't know we had jobs and economic development still. Well, it's good to know. But I mean, just to hear 4 non-controversial bills, it took an hour and 15 minutes, So it's a lot slower process. The building's a lot emptier. We don't have they're screening visitors a little bit more. So that's been quite different. The attitude, I think, there's a pretty good bipartisan vibe right now. And I think a lot of both Republicans and Democrats feel like we've done this thing for 7 weeks where the governor's kind of doing a new big policy change. Like there was a big workers' comp related to COVID-19 announcement. Nobody really knew that was coming. People weren't sure what the terms were going to be. And then all of a sudden, boom, just gets announced. And there were 3 pending bills on workers' comp for COVID-19 that were all overridden effectively by the governor's executive order. So there's been some controversial things in the paper about spending $1 billion for PPE masks from a Chinese supplier, a company called BYD that actually made electric buses. They repurposed factories, and then the state got the first batch of masks and they didn't pass federal standards. So, you know, and the source of funds for that weren't identified ahead of time. You know, the legislature's kind of reasserting itself, I think, as you know, one of the 3 branches of our constitutional democracy, and it's about time. I mean, I think that's pretty important. California is too big, too diverse. Our economy's too large. It's geographically diverse, racially and ethnically diverse, you know, economically diverse. It's too big for one person to try to run it by executive order. I just don't think it's working very well. And we're seeing some of the consequences of that locally, where we had a plan 4 weeks ago almost to reopen safely, and you know, they haven't let us implement it, and instead they're imposing state-wide criteria that's contradictory and illogical, and doing things like counting positive cases at Lompoc Federal Penitentiary against the county, where it's a totally contained virus. We don't have any control over that facility. There's no evidence at all that that outbreak is spreading into the community. It's not. And you know, they're doing the same thing to SLO with CMC cases. So, you know, there's stuff like that just really doesn't make a lot of sense. Plus, the state criteria says you got to test more, which is great. And that's exactly what we should be doing, because you test more people. You identify asymptomatic people that might be contagious, make sure they're not spreading the virus. You identify people that are in vulnerable risk categories early, get them medical intervention early. More testing is a great thing for public health and for our economy to get that back going. But then the state, on the other hand, says test more on the one hand, and on the other hand, they say, but if you have too many positives, you're disqualified from reopening. So, well, that makes no sense. It makes no sense logically or epidemiologically. It's frustrating, because we know for a scientific fact, 50% roughly of people with COVID-19 are asymptomatic. They don't have symptoms. So when you test more people, you're going to get more positives. That's a fact. So, you know, there's ways that the state is handling this through the California Department of Public Health that I think are really doing harm to the 2 counties I represent, as well as certain other counties. Because I mean, we're at the point, you know, we need to get people back to work. We need to get things back opened up. It's going to be different. There's going to be social distancing policies. I think a lot more people are going to be wearing masks. I think, and we need to phase it in and be guided by the science and what our doctors are telling us. But we're ready to go, man. We just need to get the state to let us do it.
Right. And again, we had a great webinar yesterday, and we talked with a few of the doctors, and we had that conversation, whether it should be about trends rather than straight numbers as we're trying to encourage testing. So I think that's a great point you made there. Just so, do you think there's been some good things to come out of this? I mean, how we do our work or how the state operates, have there been things that we have figured out that will make things better, or any silver linings that came from some of this? We know that there are a ton of negatives, but was there anything that you've seen that maybe has been positive, even if it's just on like a personal level?
Yeah, there have been a number of things. I mean, we should all be grateful and thankful that our death toll didn't look like Italy's. I mean, you know, this is a nasty virus. It's probably more lethal than the flu, and it certainly spreads faster, and it spreads asymptomatically. So, you know, it's not something to be, trifled with. I think the state issuing a statewide stay-at-home order, our county did it a day earlier than the state actually, probably saved a lot of lives. I mean, so my hat's off to the people that made those tough decisions here. Locally, it was Wade Horton, CAO, with Dr. Penny Bornstein. It was the governor on the state level. I think when they did that on March 16th and 17th, that was necessary and the right move. I think you need to constantly reevaluate, especially an order that has some constitutional issues with it, that is certainly very draconian, serious, and certainly causes economic harm and other adverse public health consequences. When you shelter people at home, you see an increase in domestic violence. We've seen that here. It's doubled in the last 4 or 5 weeks. Teen suicides are up. People aren't getting mammograms and cardiograms. That's not good. People aren't scheduling medically necessary surgeries like angioplasties. That's not good. So you got to put all of the public health consequences in the balance when you're evaluating a policy. And what I've seen on the state level, not on the local level, certainly not in our county, because they've done a great job. But what I've seen on the state level is sort of a failure to update the policy to track the real-time data, the actual empirical data. A lot of what they were basing this on before was modeling, but a lot of the assumptions that were the inputs into the models were just not correct. And we know a lot more now than we knew back then. And so I think they need to modify it and update that very, very quickly. I've seen people, though, it's been sort of inspiring to see the amount of sacrifice people are willing to make to protect the vulnerable people. I mean, this virus is virtually killing, it's fatal to almost no children. It even spreads at a lower rate amongst children. The scientists we can't explain that right now. We don't know why, but that's a good thing. And if you're healthy and you're under 55, like you might get sick, you might not, you're probably not going to require medical intervention. 85% of people that are COVID-19 positive, this is based on nationwide CDC stats, 85% recover at home without any medical intervention. That's a good thing. SARS had a death rate of 10%. The death rate of COVID-19 is going to be a lot lower when the dust settles and they have real numbers to run. So seeing people being willing to risk bankruptcy, close their business, lay off beloved employees, maybe they get a loan that helps from the feds that helps them through a couple months. Some didn't. People were asked to make incredibly tough decisions and comply with the incredibly tough, orders that dislocated their lives. Plus, the shutdown of the schools and closure of the ball fields and sports and drama and activities, and kids can't see their friends. And cumulatively, it's all, the social cost of that is just incalculable. So, but people have been willing to do it, to up to a point. And that's impressive. That's inspiring. But they shouldn't be asked to do it a day longer than the evidence warrants. And that's we're here locally, in my view, based and the opinion of our public health director, who's an MD, and I've watched her work every day, and we've been on the phone probably 5 times a week throughout this crisis. She is top notch, and she says, we've been ready to go for 4 weeks. So we've got to get back to the new normal, and it's interesting to me. People are rightfully pointing out the incredibly dire numbers of the state budget. It's like, well, I was telling some of my colleagues up there, hey, I got one idea. If you're worried about state revenue, let us go back to work. Let people start living again, man. And, earn an income that they then pay taxes on, and buying things that they pay sales tax on. It's been pretty wild.
Yeah, well, I love the point you made about the sacrifice. I think that is such an important, we've seen truly amazing, we have businesses here supporting other businesses to try to help keep them open, people staying inside and, putting themselves at great financial risk to make sure we're getting through that. And I love what you said. And one of the things I'm hopeful for, and I think you just nailed on the head, was I'm thankful that we have Penny Bornstein and hopefully through this, we've learned a little bit more about public health and washing our hands. And afterwards, we'll come through this with some better public health. But I think that was a great comment on to what is, some of the positives that we've seen here. But I agree with you certainly that we need to start figuring out how to make that work, especially for our county. But I can't even believe it. We're already a half hour. You committed that. I thank you for being here with us. We'll have to have you back to keep digging into this, because I feel like we could do this for another hour. And I didn't get a chance to talk to the folks who left questions on our Facebook Live, but I really want to thank you so much for eating lunch with us today. And we're hoping everybody that's watching will join us next week, same time, same place, when we talk to the Executive Director of First Five SLO County, Wendy Wendt, who also happens to be the Chamber's Vice Chair of Legislative Affairs and serves on the statewide First Five Legislative Action Team. She'll be talking about the state of childcare in our community, another huge issue, what a family-friendly workplace looks like in the time of COVID, and kind of how she made the transition from teaching Russian to advocating for young children. So for your folks out there, if there's someone you'd like us to invite to lunch, we email your ideas to slochamber@slochamber.org. And we will, again, Mr. Assemblyman Jordan Cunningham, thank you so much for being with us today and being so open to the discussion.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. Thank you all for tuning in.
Yeah, everybody have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe and healthy out there. We'll look forward to seeing you soon.